This Hangout's live on YouTube Live. Analytics at Dynasty.com. This is Jordan McNamara. I'm here with Adam Wilson. Doing a little Thursday night hangout session. No Thursday night football. No writing to do, Adam. No editing.
Finally done proofreading, editing, writing. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I put it in a PDF last night and it's done. So
no kidding.
Yeah. So it's a finished product. So now I need to figure out something to do. So I said, hey, let's hop on YouTube Live.
Let's do it.
Here we are. So I mean, it's been, I don't know, we did this 6 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say a month and a half ago.
Yeah. So I think a lot's changed. Obviously we'll get into the book a little bit, but I think the NFL is interesting right now. Obviously rookie drafts are interesting.
You should probably tell people about your book, what it is.
I should probably tell people about the book. Yeah, I mean, we'll get to that. We were just talking before we got online how I hated about talking about myself. So Analytics at Dynasty is the Analytics at Dynasty. It's coming out on Monday. I think it finished as 143 official pages. There's a foreword, a preface, and dedication. So there's some of that stuff, but the crux of it's about 143 pages. I go through a whole litany of different topics. Adam's actually had a chance to read it, so we can dive in a little bit on just some overarching things. Just some of the content of it. Yep. But yeah, it's been a project. I don't know, like 10 months in the making. I think it's finally here. It's interesting to finally see it, talk about it. It's to actually have it be a thing that people are actually going to read it. It's funny. You were one of, there's basically 3 people who have read it so far.
Yep.
You're one of them. And, it's funny that I don't know, you see people now, I don't know, the emperor has no clothes, right? People see it. And so they know, and it's totally it's a really interesting, all of that's, it's an interesting sort of experience to go from it being a theoretical or just in my own mind to people actually seeing it. So yeah, I mean, I can give a rundown here on sort of what's in it. We did some new metrics, which I really like. I think that it's a different way to look at stuff. So WARP is a stat I talk a lot about in the book. I think it's a different way to look at Dynasty, look at fantasy. I think it talks a lot about positional values in ways that people don't look at it. Yep. And AWARP, which by the way, you would be absolutely, AWARP would not be a thing if it wasn't for your help collecting all the data on that. So I can't thank you enough about that, because I would have never been able to have gotten the data for AWARP if it wasn't for you to help me. But yeah, so I don't know, I'm just looking down so AWARP, WARP, there's a lot of stuff in there, rule of 7, rule of 97, all of those things to help you work on your team. Talk a lot about age, talk a lot about some player fundamentals, some biases, some positional scoring, some starter rates, all that stuff, talking about prior year scoring of teams and how that impacts Dynasty. I think that's really interesting, particularly at this point in the year, looking at people to buy low on, offenses to target, that sort of things. I put rookie drafts before startup drafts because I think a lot of how you look at players should define how you look at startup drafts. And I think we do that more in rookie drafts and startup drafts. And I think that's a mistake. Or I think that is, I think that's a mistake. So I think I talk a lot about rookie drafts and the type of players you want to look at in rookie drafts. And I think that should guide your startup draft. I don't think people think like that in startup drafts, where I think they do more in rookie drafts. Mm-hmm. And then I have, I basically have quote unquote the grand theory or whatnot. It's, what I call 8% process, a theory of team building, some guides on how to make better decisions. And then I looked at the process going forward, and then what I call 8% implemented. And that's talking about how you build a team, the decisions that you should make, how you should make decisions, how you should put together teams, the risks you should take, all that stuff. And then I finished with a a case study on how I did a rebuild, which was, I guess we'll start there in sort of specifics. I thought that was like, I didn't intend to write that as a chapter. Like I had a team that was in like a really good team that I had won 2 games, or I had won 1 game in the past 2 years with the team. It turns into being this juggernaut this year that ends up scoring like, I think it was like 6 to 8 more points per game than anyone else in the league. Just ridiculous. I didn't hit on like, I missed on Geis like in his rookie. It wasn't just like getting Barkley either. Like I didn't get Barkley. Like I got Geis and I got Chubb, and neither of them. Like I was 5-2 and had gotten no help from my rookie class. It was sort of funny how it all came together. But I sort of go through that whole process, and I think that there was like a couple of massive missed trades in there. And what I would tell people is like I look at that. I look at that thing right now. It's the last chapter of this 140-page book that I wrote. And like, I've played Dynasty, like I've did all this research on this book. And one thing I would point people to is like, don't be afraid to miss. Like I missed massively on 2 trades in that who knows if they, if they change my fortune over the past 3 years. They probably do to some degree. But it still turns out to be a league contending team a couple of years later. And, I didn't intend to really compete until this year or next year. I think it came a little bit quicker. The cycle definitely looked different than I expected. It was basically bottom, and then top. Like there was no sort of gradual incline. But yeah, I mean, I think that was like one of the more fun things I did in the entire book.
How much do you think that was because of the 2016 rookie class? Like that's an interest, or 2017, the Kamara class, because I know that team specifically, you ended up getting what, Njoku, Ingram, Kamara, Juju, and
James Conner.
And then you got James Conner. Right. So I mean, that definitely is part of it, right? I mean,
yeah. So just to give you an idea of like, and obviously this is all in the book, and you can get it the full on breakdown. But Alvin Kamara at 109. Njoku at 110, Ingram at 201, Juju Smith-Schuster at 202, and James Conner at 209. To give you an idea, in 2018 terms, I believe I think Kamara was like Kamara was almost a 2 warp. James Conner was about a 1.5, and Juju Smith-Schuster was right around the same spot. So just in that rookie class alone, and I didn't really get good years from Njoku or Ingram. I mean, Ingram was hurt and Njoku was fine, but they weren't really difference makers. But between 3 rookies, including 2 second-round rookie picks, I added 5 wins over replacement. And so just this year, so when you think about sort of, I don't know, people will talk down rookie picks and will say, that rookie picks aren't valuable. Is that an outlier? Absolutely. Like you don't expect to hit on that in a rookie draft, but at the same time, I still think that the data that I collected and that I looked at shows that rookie picks are still undervalued by the market.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about rookie drafts like that, that class was a standout. You hit on 4 or 5 players right there. I don't think it's always going to be like that. I think it's a matter of picking the players, that you're targeting in rookie drafts and sticking to that and not going against the grain and just like part of what I like about what you do is, flipping picks and moving up and getting in positions to acquire the players that you want. So it's not a matter of taking a bunch of players. It's a matter of, I'm going to spend 4 picks on players and hit on, all 4 of them, and they're going to be core assets. And so I think when we talk about from class to class, like 2016, or the Kamara draft, right? Like I look back and, I think that changed my teams as well, that class in several leagues. But then I followed up this year, and there's only 3 or 4 or 5 players in the entire class that, could do that. So I think it depends on, the class, and being able to pick those players is obviously, pick the correct players is obviously, that's part of it. So
yeah. No, did I get lucky to an extent on Kamara? I mean, I thought Kamara was good. I thought he was really good. I don't think he was transcendent.
No. You didn't think he was going to be a top 5 ADP startup pick?
No, for sure not. But did I think that he was going to be a plus? But again, I would say that, I mean, his ADP that rookie class was 111, and I picked him, like, I religiously got to 107. And I got to 107 either trading up or trading down. And that year I traded a ton in rookie drafts. Like, this is one league out of 15 or whatever that I had that year. And I was all over. I traded all over the board in that class because there was, and one thing I think that really, I think it's really important to think about is, having a strategy, right? You can look at players, right? And you can say, I like, this year, I like Joshua Jacobs, right? Out of Alabama. But the question is really the cost, right? And sort of, or a guy that I think is going to be a really interesting conversation is a guy like David Montgomery in this rookie class, because there are portions of his profile that I like. There are portions of his profile that I don't like. The question is his cost, right? And I think if you're right, a traditional, like a checkers approach to this would be like, well, he's the third player on my board. I'll take him at 103. I think when you're playing chess, right, if you look and say, well, if he is a late round 2 or round 3 NFL draft pick, that's a bad pick in the top 3 of a rookie draft, right? So trading down, moving off of that value, right? Kicking it out a year, all of those sorts of things are in play. And I think that really is this, you should know the players, obviously, but I think that you should think about more the strategy than really targeting players, and I think the players that you should target, like this year, I don't know, there might be I put a board together, but then I really identify players at costs that I like, and I go through a whole system, and we'll probably talk about that at some point more, but I go through a whole system of really identifying who I want to target and at what cost. And I think that that's more important than, hey, I really like so-and-so's tape,
Well, and so doesn't this go to, like, one of your points in the book is, drafting the profile over the player, or looking at profiles. And so, like, when we're talking about, that rookie class, you said you have James Conner in like 60% of your leagues. So, like, that's a good profile and where you're getting him at in that rookie draft. And so it's funny enough, and I've been doing this for years, the same thing that you do. Like, I identify where I want to actually pick rookies in rookie drafts, and I do not take them before that. And if they go ahead, then they go ahead. And just like you said with Kamara at 107, that was like the pick that I was taking Kerryon Johnson, or wanted to get Kerryon Johnson in this last draft. And I think that is a strategy that works if you're targeting these, specific profiles of players. And, to be fair, it's January 17th right now, so I haven't gotten a ton into the rookie picks, but I'm seeing a lot into the rookies, I should say. I'm seeing a lot of the David Montgomery RB1 love. And I'm just saying, man, if he doesn't test well and he falls in the draft, like, taking him in the top 3 of rookie picks or rookie drafts is not something that I want to be doing. And on the other hand, you mentioned Josh Jacobs, like, he's my RB1. Like, I love him. It's just a matter of where he's going to go. Am I going to be able to get him? And so I think I've actually seen you tweet out, where do you have him right now? Where are you picking him?
Yeah, I did. I got a little bit of pushback on that. I tweeted out when he declared 101.
Yep.
And I think that's all I put. Again, I think when you look at strategy, I don't have any 101 picks at this point. Actually, I take that back. I have one. It's a start 2 QB league that everyone got hurt this year. It was the first year of a startup, and boy, it was a disaster. Yep. I thought my Des Bryant pick 100 in a startup like last January was like, an expert's delight. And the draft just didn't go well, or the team just didn't go well year one. Stafford was a disappointment. I mean, everything just went wrong.
Yep.
So I have 101 there. It's quarterback premium. We'll see, how all that breaks out. But I guess what I would say is, like, I think it's this year is going to be an interesting test case on what you value, because you see a guy like Montgomery, who, again, if he's the 103, I'm not interested. If he's the 206, then I'm intrigued, right?
Yep.
I think all of those, there's a lot of those cases this year. And over at uthdynasty.com, where I do my podcast, we are doing 4 rookie spotlights a week right now, just breaking down rookies. We got a real late start. We started doing this in like October and November last year. We went to a different format in season, so we haven't done any, but we're doing, we're trying to catch up quick, with 4 a week. And I'll tell you, there's some running backs that are interesting to me this year. But I think that this falls into an odd value situation this year, because what you're going to, I suspect, and I talked about something I call the OBJ effect, which is that I think the past, what has happened in fantasy flips how it's a lot about recency bias in terms of what the market does. I think you might see rookie picks. I think you might see rookie running backs go above where they should go historically in terms of their value.
Gotcha.
And so, who are those people? Are they going, is David Montgomery going at 104 because he's running back 2 and people are just dying for running backs, right? I think that outcome is certainly is a possibility. But what I more look at is the second and third round guys. Those are the guys that really interest me. And I think that's where I like to spend a lot of my attention, because that's a lot of how I build my teams, is through that range in terms of those types of players. So I'm really interested to see, there might be 20 running backs that I'm interested in depending on the cost. And, a lot, I go through the whole rookie plan and stuff about how to put it together. But I think that between there's some running backs, we'll see how the receiver class turns out. I mean, a lot of the book talks about how important pedigree is at receiver. And, a lot of the book talks about the decisions to make between running back and receiver. I'm not going to go too super into that, because I don't want to, people are subscribing to the book and buying the book for an edge. I don't want to get too super into giving away the stuff. If you have any specific questions or something you want to see some of the work in terms of what I'm talking about, I'll have that conversation with you on in private, on DM or an email. You can shoot me an email for anyone listening that is interested in sort of a little bit more. I don't want to give away a ton of the stuff, because people spent their hard-earned money and invested in me. So I want to, give them some, the private information, don't want to necessarily give it away. But there's a lot of, a lot of value decisions to make in terms of positions and about how you build a team and efficiency that I go into. But I'll say this season, the receiving, if the receivers are going to be better than running backs, I think that it maybe warrants a non-traditional approach to this year's rookie draft class. And I'm not saying go super wide receiver heavy, but again, identifying 3 or 4 people. I mean, last year I was in, I forget the exact number, 18 to 20 Dynasty leagues, and I ended up with a total of 4 rookie receivers. Half of them were, so I had 8 total shares of rookie receivers. Half of them were Traquan Smith in like the late second. 2 of them were Cortland Sutton right around the I think it was either 111 or 112 that I got him. I got a share of Kirk, and I got a share of James Washington. But that's it. And, I that's sort of how I build my teams, to give you an idea. And I think that, like, to be super selective on who you're taking, where you're taking them at. Maybe this year's a little bit different, because from a positional value, if they are better positionally in terms of where you're taking them in rookie drafts, maybe it is the year, right? You allegedly, you do have to roster receivers. It's not something that I love to do, but I am told that you have to roster them in most of the leagues that I'm in. Yeah. It's unfortunate at times, but sometimes you actually do have to roster them. So that's something that, I'm looking at. Is it a scenario where this is a year where I'm on more rookie receivers relatively speaking, than I am running backs at cost. I'm open to different ideas on how that all happens. Guys, also, just so you know, this is streaming live on YouTube. If you're watching, you obviously know that. Jump in the chat with us. There's a chat here. Ask us questions. I'm open to any questions anyone has, and you can hit it. I got it on the other screen to see all the chat stuff coming in. So go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of love for all the receivers, and at this point, I kind of have my favorites, but it's so early in the process, and I think that from what I've seen so far, I'm seeing a lot of mocks of regular NFL draft with the receivers going as high as the top 10. And I'm not sure that that's going to happen this draft. I think you're going to see some receivers in the first round. But, I mean, this is kind of what we're talking about, what you talk about in terms of profiles. And the receivers, like, you want them to have good pedigree. And so I don't know if any of these guys are going to they'll probably be the ADP will probably get high because there's such a love for like a N'Keal Harry. But I don't know if you see these receivers in the same class as a Corey Davis a couple of years ago. I don't think that that's going to be what happens. And I definitely don't think you're going to see a receiver go in the top 5. I have seen some mocks in the top 10, but I think that that's going to play a factor. And so I think that the landscape with the receivers and how I value them is going to change as to where they go. If they're getting pushed into the second round, it's just going to be, there's going to be a big difference pedigree wise if we have guys go in the top 10 or not. And I don't see that happening with this class. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is, well, I don't have many first round picks, but pick your favorite guy and just stick with them.
Yeah.
I like Metcalf a little bit. I'm not a big N'Keal Harry fan. I like Harmon a little bit, but some of these other guys, I like. Travis May has been doing, where he puts out a poll for each pick, 101, and then takes the remaining players in 102, 103, and I think it's crazy how many of these receivers are going above some of these running backs, but it is still early. That we haven't got testing numbers yet. We haven't gotten any. We don't know where these guys are going, but pedigree is going to play a big role in a lot of these players for me. So,
yeah, and I think that's right. Like we can study, and again, I am way behind on receivers. I usually get to receivers are typically the position that I study last because I think that a lot matters. A lot of the information we get late in the process matters most, right? So the testing's super important, right? We know from a production standpoint how people have produced, like we can look at those metrics and stuff. You can look at all of those things and those things all matter, but I think a lot of what matters is the information that we get last, which is where they go in drafts. And before that, we learn about the combine. But I think that it's super important receiver pedigree. So, and one thing I would caution people on is, there are receivers that I like that fall. And Cortland Sutton's a great example of this. Kenny Galladay, although I don't like him as much as other people do, he's an example of this. When you get receivers that fall, I always think of and especially when they're prototypically sized, right? We're not talking, right? There's a reason why Stephon Diggs fell, right? There's a reason why Tyreek Hill fell. And these guys that hit from later on, there's a reason why Antonio Brown fell. There's all these reasons why these guys fall. But one thing I would point to people is when you see a prototypically sized receiver fall, whether it's Cortland Sutton, whether it's Kenny Galladay, whether it's, guys like Economy St. Brown, when people were over Marquez Valdez-Scantling in season, like when you're making these big investments, and I always come back to, I can have a feeling about somebody, but I think that you really have to regress it to their draft pedigree. Now, is draft pedigree the only thing? No. As we get more information, should we change our opinions on a player? Yes, but I would caution people about doing that a lot, right? I think that what in a lot of the historical study that I did for the book and a lot of the stuff that I looked at, I think people would be surprised at how their good feelings about players going into the draft, especially when these players fall, you got to be super, super careful, and especially at wide receiver. Especially at wide receiver. I can make an exception for running back. But at wide receiver, it's really important because I don't know. I sit here today, right? And it's what, January 17th. I wish it was
July.
Yeah, I'm supposed to get 18 inches of snow on Sunday, so I really wish it was July. I'd be outside mowing my lawn twice instead of snowballing. But yeah, I mean, when I don't know. I look at Detroit, right? You get a guy like Kenny Galladay. Mm-hmm. Do we think that they're like, how confident does anyone feel about him being the wide receiver one? See, I watched every game of Detroit this year, and I don't feel super confident. Right? I recapped every game for Football Guys, and I would be really surprised if Kenny Galladay is a wide receiver one for any length of time in the NFL.
People love him.
People love him. You know what? I owned him one spot. I cashed out at what I would consider a big profit. I think it was last year, actually. And I'm super skeptical. Like, and the same thing with Cortland Sutton, right? Like, Cortland Sutton's a good player. I had questions about his profile. I think the NFL mirrored that to some degree because, right, if Cortland Sutton was an alpha number one coming out, he wouldn't have been in pick in the 40s or whatever. I think he was 42 or whatever. He was in the 40s of the NFL draft, right? That wouldn't, right? Those guys go in the top 10, right? If he was Julio Jones, he would have been a top 10 draft pick, right?
Yeah, or a Calvin Johnson.
Right. Yes. Right. So I think you have to be super right, especially when they're big and especially when they look like number ones, and they don't like that. That's scary to me. And you got to be super cautious, right? So does that mean he can't be a number one wide receiver? No, but it means that, even when we see more, right, I still come back to that, right? Even if I'm super impressed or whatever, I still have that thought in the back of my mind where I'm still regressing back towards what his draft pedigree is because I have that question about him.
Yeah, I completely agree. It looks like we got some questions in the chat.
We do have some questions in the chat. All right, let's see here. There's some people in the chat. Andrew Harbaugh and Alphabet Danny, which I can't really see his. I can't see his logo, but it looks interesting.
That's my co-host Karen. So she is.
Oh, okay. All right.
She is actually a YouTube sensation, or her son is. So
gotcha. Is that her son's name, Alphabet Danny?
Yeah, it's a video on YouTube. So
gotcha.
That is. I think it has. She just said it's over 1 million hits. I think.
No kidding.
Over 1 million views. Yeah, it's really impressive. And he's the cutest little kid. So
cool. Let me go to Andrews first, and then we'll come back to that one. He says, "Are there any players you feel are worth a reach at any position where you feel they're the ultimate boom or bust?" I think it matters the cost, right? So, am I willing to reach on players like, for instance, I think James Conner was a boom bust profile.
Yep.
And I think he's a litmus test for a lot of how I look at dynasty football. A lot of how I have come to really look at like life, honestly. Like you look at, I like to make investments that have massive payoffs, right? So when you can make them at cheap costs, right? I love that massive payoff, right? Mm-hmm. Now, is there a possibility that a guy like James Conner was an absolute zero, right? Le'Veon Bell never gets hurt. He re-signs a massive contract with the Steelers, and James Conner is his straight backup for 4 years, right? Yes. Is he a bust at that point? Maybe. We'll see how he resurfaces, but you've set 4 years with him producing nothing. Right? There was a possibility of that, right? Maybe even a probability, right? That's not how it turned out, but I think there was a good chance that happened. I sort of took the opposite view. And again, from a historical draft perspective, he actually fell further than he should have, right? He should have been, he ended up being, I think he was like the 25.6 pick. It was his ADP for the entire year of his rookie draft, for his rookie year. And so he should have been an early second round draft pick by his draft pedigree. So, there was value there from a historical draft perspective. So I was on him in the late second. He was a target player for me. that would be an example of a boom bust, right? To me, at receiver, I don't like boom bust profiles. I sort of want. I'm a snob at receiver, so I take a lot of what I would consider bulletproof prospects, right? I'm a big fan of players that look like Brandon Cooks, of players that look like Corey Davis, of players that are maybe you're not going to Devontae Adams coming into this year, right?
Yep.
That they had, I jokingly had I think it's funny now, but a year ago I was in a startup draft at this time of this year, and I had a conversation with Chad Parsons at UTH. We spent a while kicking around the decision between Julio Jones and Devontae Adams. And I'll always sort of think about this when I think about receivers I want super safe and, I want as many outs out of wide receiver as I can. Give me all the safety I can. And I took Adams over Julio, thinking that Adams would be probably a back half wide receiver one for a while. Now he turns into being wide receiver one, and that's, that's not why I picked him there. I got sort of, I made out well in that, but the decision I think at the time was a safety over upside type of short-term play. But that's a lot of how I think about the receiver position, at least to me. Quarterbacks, I think it's a little bit different. Am I willing to take a boom bust quarterback? Yes, but it's got to be start one, or if it's start two or super flex, the cost is important, right? Cost is important on every single decision. And I think that really the investment shouldn't be, hey, I like this player. The investment should be at this price. Do I like this player?
Yep.
Right? That's really the question. Or do I like this profile? Or who, what is a profile that I like? And is there someone at this cost that represents that? Is really, I think, the crux of how I think you should think about picks. So for me, like a guy that I thought was massively boom bust, in fact, more bust than boom, I thought, was Josh Allen. And you know what? If he was a 4th round rookie draft picks and start one leagues, that's insane. Like I spent 6 months ragging on Josh Allen from like October, like through I was at this desk on the night of the draft when the Bills took him. I was going to
say your team took him.
I was in tears. Not metaphorically speaking. I was in. I was not happy with that pick. But I think that, you look at his profile, right? You look at the fact he's a top 10 NFL draft pick. He's got the rushing ability. He's got the big arm. I jokingly have a phrase, embrace the variance. And he's an example of that, right? Like, he was the quarterback 2 for like a 6-week span down the stretch this season. That's insane. Not a quarterback 2, the quarterback 2. And, that's, so yes, in situations like that, like I remember over the summer, I had one of my first strategy sessions with one of my subscribers. He asked me about Josh Allen, and it was super late, and he was like the 5th rookie quarterback. I was like, I love that cost because that's from a historical perspective, that's a good investment, right? You might have to close your eyes and not like what you see at times, but that's a good investment. So yeah, I mean, cost is really important, and I think position is important too. I'm much more likely to take a boom bust pick at running back than I am at receiver.
Well, the other one that you kind of left out was Kalen Ballage, and we talked about it when you came on our show. And I believe, throughout the season, he basically did nothing, and then he has the game with the 75-yard touchdown, something like that. And I mean that's another one. I still look at him as that now. He's probably going to be the RB2 or possibly RB1 there, but it is another that goes to the profile rather than the player. We saw flashes when he was at Arizona State, but 230-pound running back, off the charts athleticism, has some pass catching, and went in the. I think he was day 2 of the draft, right? He was a 3rd round pick, or was he 4th?
I think he was an early 4th round pick.
Early 4th, yeah. So I mean, that's another another profile. And where were you getting him in rookie drafts? 205 to 210, somewhere in there.
He was a target player for me outside of James Washington, right? He was the next player on the list after James Washington.
Same for me.
Yeah, and so that's and James Washington fell right around the he was like the 201 to 204 range, and anything after that was Balaj.
Mhm.
And again, I look at Balaj, and that is a boom bust profile for sure. He has high athletic upside. He's a good receiver. He is, fully capable of all of that. Was his rushing production great at Arizona State? No. Is there questions about his interior tape? Absolutely. But you know who else had that same exact conversation about him?
Who's that?
David Johnson.
Yep.
You can change the numbers a little, change the names, and it's pretty close to the same evaluation. Now, am I saying that Kalen Balaj is going to be David Johnson? No. But when you talk about types of players, right, those are the types of investments you want to take. So I am perfectly fine with Kalen Balaj, sitting on my bench and never doing anything, and missing on him because I think the upside's really high. And I just, from a positional standpoint, I don't think that same, analysis or same statement holds for receivers.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
And you know what the funny thing is I noticed in my leagues, the teams that are successful have a core group of receivers, most of the time high pedigree, but they all kind of seem to be the same receivers. They are, Devontae Adams. Some of them actually have, Tyreek Hill in there, but there is a core group, and the teams at the top all have a group of 3 or 4 receivers that they are just playing every single game. They don't have any decisions to make. And I think that, that's something that you've talked about on my show was, getting lean at the wide receiver position and cut out the receivers that, are not in your starting lineup every week, and spend those on shots at running back that are going to see the field or could see the field. So.
Right. Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. And I mean, here's it's funny. The Brandon Cooks conversation is something that we've talked about before, but people always rag on Brandon Cooks as always boom bust. I don't think that's true. B, from a win perspective, right? And this is this is why I think my book has value, right? Because I am able to distill it down into actually, what matters, right, is wins, right? And there's so many narratives and all that stuff's fine, but what matters truly is winning games.
Yep.
And is Brandon Cooks have some variance? Sure. But so does every receiver. And Brandon Cooks is in the top 10 of receivers in the past 4 years of starter games, of positional finishes. I mean, you can basically book him to be a top 15 receiver. I mean, that has a ton of value from a statistical perspective. Yes. From a warp perspective. Yes. From all of that's from a lineup perspective. Sure. He's got some upside, all that stuff. But in addition, you have the safety and stability of one person that you don't have to, try and piece together a roster spot or piece together a lineup spot. And you know what? All right, he's going to see between 100 and 120 targets. And, in that offense, he's going to rush the ball 20 times, right? Because they do these end around type deals.
Yep.
And all right, so I sort of can, based off of historical data, I can sort of project how many points that's going to be, right? Because, we know the average is about 1.8 points per target, and you have a pretty good idea of what that is. So I think about a lot about receivers. How do I plug in targets? And, are they going to have up and down weeks? That's the nature of the receiver position. But ultimately, I don't really care of what week it is, right? Because if I have 3 wide receivers that I'm starting, if one of them has a high week, one of them has a median week, and one of them has a low week, that's probably about what you would expect. And if I have good receivers, right, I mean, that's fine, right? Because I'm going to have some upside. I'll probably have a middling week, and I might have a guy that only has, 5 targets for 2 catches and 30 yards, right? That happens at receiver. But I'm not really worried about it, right? Because I'm worried about I'm worried about making the playoffs and getting a bye. And I don't look at games on individual games. I don't really care if my teams win on an individual week, right? I'm more worried about if they win 10 games during the regular season. That's what I care about. I don't really live and die by. I think people live and die too much in the week. And maybe that's just because I play too many teams. That's entirely possible. But yeah, I mean, I think that you sort of if you frame it a different way, you see the value in these types of guys. So that's, yeah. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on Corey Davis going forward? Just because, I can't get away from this conversation.
No, I am the ultimate. I mean, I was pumping up Corey Davis all off season last year. And, the problem that I have with him is not the talent, because if you watch his game, you can tell that he's the best receiver on the field every play. At this point, I'm definitely not selling him. I think for how bad the season went for him, and I think he ended up as like wide receiver 26, which probably surprises a lot of people. At this point, I'm definitely not going to sell him, even though his value has held up pretty well given the season. That offense is terrible. I still am not a fan of Mariota, and I'm even less of a fan of Mariota with he gets injured all the time. I find it hard to believe that Corey Davis is not going to be an elite receiver in the NFL. Like, I just find it hard to believe. And, maybe an elite receiver is, I guess the definition of that is, very specific. So maybe not elite receiver, but I find it hard to believe that he's not going to be at least as talented or as, productive as Brandon Cooks. So, and I think that you're going to see him as a top 10 dynasty wide receiver sooner rather than later. But it is concerning with the offense there. LaFleur just left, but, the quarterback position is what worries me most about that offense. So, and how it affects him.
Yeah. Wouldn't you say that this year was like the worst case scenario for him?
No, absolutely. The only thing worse is if he gets hurt for the entire year.
Right. But for a situation wise, I mean, you couldn't Blaine Gabbert started and wasn't good. Mariota was injured and some combination of injured and ineffective, right? It seems like everything went bad for him, right? Yep. Everything and he finishes wide receiver 26 on 112 targets, which is not, and it was inefficient, right? Mm-hmm. It was inefficient. It was largely, below what you would expect those targets to produce in terms of points. And that always points to a buy, right? Because the greatest example of this, maybe ever, but definitely recently, is DeAndre Hopkins when he had, let's see, it was 2016. He had 151 targets. Actually, him and Allen Robinson had the same amount of targets and basically finished with the same amount of points.
Yep.
And he had 1.3 yards per fantasy points per target, which is insanely low. That's almost a half a point below what you would expect. And it was a clear buy, right? It was a clear buy because it's bad variance. And I think a lot of that's what happened with Davis, right? Did he have a bad situation? Yes. But at the same time, I think he had bad variance, right? So you point at all of those things, and I like the player. He could easily finish as a top 12 wide receiver next year, and I wouldn't blink. I wouldn't blink an eye if he finishes wide receiver 10 next year. It wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah, I mean, over under wide receiver 26, I'm taking the over all day long. I find it hard to believe that he's going to finish wide receiver 26 or below again. I just don't see it happening unless there's an injury. Yes. I should have said he's a buy, but I own him in every league that I'm in. Yeah. So, but yes, I'm hoping that his value would dip down so folks can go and get him in, the 4th round of startups, 5th round of startups. But I believe he's still at the end of round 3. So
yeah. Hey, who knows? Maybe we'll have a better way to measure that in the next month or so. Who knows?
Could happen.
We'll have to see what happens. There might be a better way to measure startup draft costs. I don't know.
If only.
Just teasing. All right. So let's see. All right. So the question was, let's see. You just mentioned how you do not tend to draft rookie wide receivers. How many shares of Juju do you have? And if you want him, are you forced to overpay? Right. Juju Smith-Schuster, one of the things I talk about in the book is, you know, and that's a question from Karen, by the way. One of the things I talk about in the book is, right, you look at types of players. I was probably too low on Juju Smith-Schuster because I questioned his athleticism.
Yep.
You know, but from everything else, right, you look at the 18-year-old breakout and you look at his production and you look at sort of, you know, his recruiting score, which is sticky. And you look at everything but that. And he gets drafted to Pittsburgh, right? I don't love to do that with players like, hey, he got drafted here. You know, I don't like to project that a ton, but there are certain examples, right? The Saints, right? If a player gets drafted by the Saints, I'm automatically interested just because I think Sean Payton's a god. You know, if the Steelers draft a receiver, I'm interested, right? If the Steelers draft another team big running back guy, I'm interested, right? I mean, there are certain situations. I mean, there's 5 in the NFL, right? Let's not get carried away on that with every team, but there are certain situations where teams are really good at one thing and they're really good at receivers. So I look at all of that stuff, and yeah, he was like a late round one, maybe. I think his ADP fell right around the turn ultimately.
Yeah, 202, I think, is what it ended up at.
Yeah, so I was on him. Maybe I got him in 30% of my league, something like that. It wasn't super high because I was also targeting, right. He fell in a range with me that I liked Ingram more than I liked Juju. So there was that sort of that cost benefit, you know, that opportunity cost with taking him against Ingram that I didn't take him as much. But no, I like him. The question is like, is he? I look at him and I'm like, is he really a top 5 wide receiver in Dynasty? I like the guy, but you know, he's going to be a wide receiver 1, right? He's probably still going to have the same amount of targets. I mean, I like him. I like his profile. I like everything about him. It's just interesting to me to see him rise up to be a round 1 startup pick. I'm not saying he doesn't warrant that, right? I mean, he's had 2 awesome seasons as you know, he's going to be 23 years old, right? I mean, that profile is very exclusive. But it's certainly interesting to see that cost compared to where he came from, being a 2nd round rookie pick.
I think the other situation that you would want to throw in there would be the Kansas City running backs.
Yeah,
that's another one that, actually that entire offense.
Yeah, right.
I could do without Sammy Watkins there, and if they drafted a receiver, that'd be great. But yeah,
you're not a Sammy guy, huh?
No, well, I mean, so I like him for the price that I can get him at. But it wouldn't surprise me if he never has a wide receiver 1 year for the rest of his career. It wouldn't shock me, just because I remember him in Buffalo. I owned him. I was taking him 101 in startup drafts in his draft, and it was so frustrating to own him because he would have these great games and then he would get these little nagging injuries and play 3 plays and then just be out. And I think it's in how he is now is kind of what I saw from before. The little injuries have just nagged him his entire career. And I don't know if he's ever playing at full strength anymore, or full health, I should say. So while I like him because you can get him at, you know, 5th, 6th, 7th round of startups, I like him in that offense. I don't know that you ever see a wide receiver 1 year out of him again. At that value, I am willing to take the risk. But, you know, if the Chiefs cut him, would that surprise you? It wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, I don't necessarily think that they need him.
He's locked. They just re-signed him though.
I know he signed a contract, but I mean, if you know, I don't know the terms of the contract, but after 1 year, would it, you know, if they can get out, will they? Maybe.
No, I don't.
You don't think?
So. Hold on.
They're going to have to pay
right now.
They're going to have to pay Mahomes at some point, right?
Yeah, but they've got him for. I mean, that's 2 years down the line.
Yeah, 2 years down the line. That's fair.
They can't cut him in. I mean, his dead money hit in 2019 would be $22 million. They can't really cut him.
Yeah, it's not going to be this season. But what about after?
In 2020, he would be owed. Let's see. His cap number would be let's see, his base salary would be $13.7 million. They could save $7 million. Excuse me. They would take a $7 million cap hit.
Yeah.
And they would save $14 million against the cap in 2020. But that will be Mahomes' 5th year.
Yeah, so he's going to be there at least. He's going to be there at least next year.
Right. So and here's the thing, like how old is Sammy Watkins?
Is he 26, 25, 26?
He's 25. And I don't think people would think that, right? I mean,
no, they wouldn't.
Kenny Galladay is almost his age.
Yeah.
Just think about that for a second. Like, they're almost the same age.
Yep.
And so, I mean, here's the thing, like, Kenny Galladay or Sammy Watkins is the exact type of player that I love, because like he's all right, again, elite pedigree, right? I know he can be an elite wide receiver.
Yep.
Does he have injuries? Yes, but that's driving down his cost, right? So I look at profiles, right? You look at profiles of players. Will Fuller's the same way. You look at profiles of players, you say, okay, do they have elite upside? Yes. Are they depressed in price? Yes. All right, I'm interested. And so I'm looking at DLF's ADP right now. Well, Sammy Watkins is wide receiver 32, and he is 66 overall. So he's a 6th-round startup pick. Will Fuller is going just in front of him. This is wide receiver 31, and he's the 61st startup pick. Yeah. So look at ready for who's in front of him. Okay.
Well,
Allen
Robinson.
Robinson.
Yeah.
Right, ready? This is going to be great. Allen Robinson, Alshon Jeffrey, which to a lesser extent, I sort of put him in the same type of boat. He's a lesser pedigree player, but he's proven to be I think a wide receiver 1 in this league. Is he going to ever finish as a top 12 wide receiver? No, but I can sort of project him to be top 30, and I think that's, from my team build perspective, I think that's fine. In front of him, ready? Chris Godwin, 27, is wide receiver 27. 26, Tyler Lockett. 26, Tyler Boyd. 25, Tyler Lockett. 24, Calvin Ridley. 23, Cortland Sutton. 22, DJ Moore. I just keep looking. 16, Kenny Galladay, which is so rich.
Well, well, we know how you feel about Kenny Galladay. The only one that I would rather have over either of those two would be DJ Moore. He would be up there with them. I mean, at that price. No, I mean, you're talking about Will Fuller and Sammy Watkins. I own both of them on several teams. So Will Fuller and almost all of them. But.
And one of the things I look at too is like I sort of look at it from who's above him, and then I sort of look who's below them, right? Because sort of with my team build, sort of the elitist wide receiver, I look below him. Doug Baldwin, Mike Williams, Anthony Miller is wide receiver 35, which is clinically insane to me. Dante Pettis is 36. Robbie Anderson's 37. Traquan Smith's 38. Marvin Jones is 39. And Sterling Shepard's 40. What do all those players have in common? None of them have the upside of Sammy Watkins or Will Fuller.
For sure.
Right? So I sort of look at it from that perspective, and I say, okay, this is an identifiable tier break to me. Right. I don't see another wide receiver 1 outside of this. Right. I mean, I'm looking I can't even project anyone outside of that to be, someone that I would feel like it would have wide receiver 1 type upside. And I think that Sammy Watkins and Will Fuller have shown that they do. Now, again, are they boom bust? Sure. Right. Might you get 6 games out of Will Fuller and he gets hurt again? Sure. But I think you look at that, like, I am a capture upside type of dynasty owner. I think that matters, right? The seasonal finish of a player doesn't matter as much as we value it, right? As much as people talk about it, it matters less than you really. That shouldn't be the way you think about it, because, and especially at receiver, because right, if Sammy Watkins isn't going to play, all right, we can figure out a different way around it. So I don't know. I look at the upside, and I think that they're warranted investments there, because there's no one behind. They are in a class of their own in terms of at their cost of their upside. So that's just how I look at it.
So to me, they are very similar players. The only difference is I've lost the confidence in Sammy Watkins, and I still have confidence in Will Fuller. Will I own both of them? Yes. You are correct. They are very, very similar. they both have pedigree, and they have this upside, and they both have injury problems. Whereas I look at Will Fuller, and I think that there's still a chance that he breaks out from that. Sammy Watkins, I'm keeping on my teams and hoping that, he gets, the injury situation figured out and he becomes, a regular play every week. I'm just not expecting it. So I guess that's the thing. Do I like Sammy Watkins? Yes. In fact, I just traded for him, I don't even know, a month ago. But I guess I just have lost confidence in him. I'll still be a buyer just because when I do the exact same thing you do and I look at the players around him, and I'm always going to take Sammy Watkins over a lot of those guys. So
yeah, and I'm totally with you on that in terms of like, I don't know, I just look at the profiles and I say, and again, you're not, see, the beauty of this, right, is you're not forced to pay a wide receiver one price.
Correct.
And again, like if you're in a startup and it's, and I sort of look at these in a, I guess it's a tad bit different in Superflex because you're going to have quarterbacks or quarterback premium. If start two, you're going to have quarterbacks in there. But in terms of like wide receivers and running backs, like if Sammy Watkins or Will Fuller is like my wide receiver 4, and I've already picked up 2 running backs, like that's a massive upside pick. Like that's a huge upside pick, right? That's just if he's your wide receiver 4, he's capable of wide receiver. Both of them are capable of wide receiver 1 production.
I agree.
So, I mean, I look at that and see that there's a boom bust analysis that I'm all in for. So, and again, I think people are fading him. And anytime anytime a narrative develops on a player that's driving their costs significantly, and especially an efficiency metric, but even if it's an injury narrative, I love betting the other side of it. Like I think there's a lot of upside there in terms of the cost and like what the profile of the player is. Sammy Watkins is not a 30-year-old washed up player, right? And Andy Reid, who you can say a lot of things about Andy Reid, one of the things that he does really well is put together offenses. They make a big time investment in him. So I look at all of that and I think that, man, those two guys, they stick out in a tier by themselves in terms of cost and upside.
So to go off of Karen's question, she says, if you want him, you're now forced to overpay for him. Like, would you overpay for him? So my answer to that right now is no, that is not the type of player that I am overpaying for. And I'm like you, I would rather go for these players that have this narrative and buy low on them, that have this upside. Is there ever a situation, or is there a type of player or profile or position that you will pay a high price for?
Elite wide receiver 1s.
You will. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And well, I think like yes. I mean, I would rather go early at receiver and be elite. I'm willing to pay that. And I think that that's contrary to the market to a degree, because I mean, this year right now we only see 4 wide receivers in the first round of startup drafts because of, I mean, basically the market's flipped back over to pre-2014. Would I rather have Juju Smith-Schuster than Antonio Brown? Yes. Are Juju Smith-Schuster and Mike Evans in the same conversation? They're right there. I think I'd rather have both of them over Keenan Allen, over Julio, over Stephon Diggs, over Thielen. So yeah, do I think Julio Jones or do I think Juju Smith-Schuster is fairly priced? I do. Now that I'm sort of looking at this, yes, I think that's a fine price for him. I hadn't quite looked at him, but I mean, I keep looking down this list. Amari Cooper and Brandon Cooks at the 2-3 turn, right? Here's a crazy idea. How about if you have 101, and I don't like to do a ton of this, startup analysis like this, but if you had 101 and you went Barkley, Cooper, and Brandon Cooks, that's a fierce start to your league. I mean, that's intense. That's a big time startup.
That's kind of interesting because you and I are both very similar in startups, and I think you would almost rather always trade out, right? You'd always rather trade out of round 1. Same, and it's the same thing for me, especially right now because of how juicy the end of the second round and into the third round is. And I think we talked about it on our last YouTube live. But it is kind of interesting when you look at that, and being able to get those two receivers at the 2-3 turn is, yeah, that piques my interest.
Yeah, but there's some projection here in some of these receivers, and it's funny because I think we've gotten to a point with receivers where there's a handful of halves. There's a couple of aging guys. You know, you've got your Julio, you got your AJ Green. That generation of receiver is hitting 30, right? Dez, I mean that whole, I mean, I talk about this in the book, but there was this generational shift in terms of receivers.
Yep.
And there hasn't been a ton of backfill in terms of elite guys, right? You've had a ton of misses at the top with, Kevin Whites and those types of guys, and Treadwells and Sterling Shepherds. Like, I sort of
Corey
look
Coleman.
at those. Yeah, Corey Coleman, right? And so you're seeing guys vault up into like the top 25 picks. DJ Moore, certainly a good metric prospect. You know, is he warranted the 44th overall pick? It's maybe a little bit different of a question for me, at least. Cortland Sutton's the same way. Calvin Ridley, right? They fall in a tier together, above probably what they've warranted in terms of what they've done in their career. So I sort of, you are in a catch of demand and supply type of. I mean, that's a factor. Has to be a factor in your analysis, and it's just interesting to see how these things all fold out as they sit right now. Because, again, that's why I think you look at Watkins and Cooper, and Watkins and Fuller, and they just such targets.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
It's funny because they're going, because Christian Kirk's going ahead of those two guys. Not like Christian Kirk, but I mean, I think you have to have some questions about the offense and sort of how it's changing and all that stuff. I mean, Christian Kirk's probably going to be a riser, but it's interesting to see how they all line up.
Yeah, and I think it was off. It was definitely off air. You and I spoke about Kirk, and you had mentioned about him possibly being a number 2, right? And I think that is really interesting when you're looking forward and projecting that offense, and looking at the future classes. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising to me if, that is a team a year from now who is diving into the wide receiver pool, of the 2020 class. And so does that push Kirk to more of a number 2 role? And is he, and I know you're probably talking about, is he a wide receiver 2 in terms of dynasty value, but also a wide receiver 2 on that team? If, like one of the Alabama receivers goes there and they're, the clear cut number 1, and Kirk is not getting the targets there. I think that is, I think that's a narrative to keep an eye on. So.
Right. And do I like Christian Kirk as a late first round rookie pick last year? Yes. Right. Do I feel the same way about him as a top 5 round startup pick? I mean, I'm a little bit closer. And, you just sort of look, I don't know, I look around the NFL in terms of teams that have, round 1 NFL draft picks at receivers under rookie contracts. And, there's 4, I'm just glancing down real quick. I mean, 5. I mean, there's more than half, right? And so you think, I'd done this before, and I think it was like 22 or something like that. And you just think about that, about how many teams are drafting receivers in round 1. Yep. And that is a risk to a guy like Kirk. Now, do I like Kirk? Yes. Do I think he's a fine player? Yes. But is he a wide receiver 1 in the NFL? I think that's a different question. And so much of what matters at receiver is, is targets. You have to sort of weigh those two things. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting, I think it's really interesting in terms of how you value these players. So again, types of players over the specifics, I think.
All right. So I got 5 questions.
Okay.
Let's spend 3 to 5 minutes on each one of them.
Okay.
Well, all right. First one is kind of a redraft question. Talk about Darius Geis being ready for OTAs. I'm not a doctor. I'm not really sure, but talk about Darius Geis's dynasty value.
Yeah. I mean, I think we don't, you know what, was Darius Geis, I know Alex Smith had a problem. Did Darius Geis have follow-up surgery?
I don't know if he had follow-up surgery. It ended up that
they had an infection or something.
They had complications with infections afterwards. Yeah. So he might have had 2. For some reason, it's sticking in my mind that he had 2 clean out surgeries or cleaning out procedures. I think there was 2. I can't say for sure.
I look at him. He's picked 35 in ADP. He is running back 15. Overall, he is. I'm just pulling it up here.
Mm-hmm.
He's in a conversation with Leonard Fournette, who I like more than Geis.
Same.
Corey Davis is going behind him. I think that's an interesting conversation from a team build perspective. One of the things I would say in terms of if I'm doing a startup draft, I think about these things a little bit differently than I do if I'm in an existing league, right? So my thing is be super safe early, right? I don't want to miss. How do I not miss? Be super safe. Trade down. How do you hit 5 times in the first 6 rounds? You draft more than 6 times, right?
Yep.
Those sorts of things. I think about that a lot. I think he's fairly priced at the running back position, is what I would say. He's going behind Fournette. He's going behind Kerryon Johnson. I think those are both right. He's going behind Dalvin Cook, which I think I would have Dalvin Cook closer to Geis in my rankings if I do them, which I don't. But I would, he's going ahead of Michelle. He's going ahead of Aaron Jones. He's going ahead of Philip Lindsay and Derrick Henry. I think all those things are appropriate. So I think he's fairly priced in terms of where he is running back wise.
I agree. And I think he's going to be a target player in, what is that, the 3rd round range at 37. Yeah, top of the 4th round. Team build wise, same thing. It just kind of depends on, the picks that you're at and if you were able to trade back, whatnot. But yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, it's kind of surprising for a guy that we haven't actually seen play more than a preseason game. But I mean, you're going right off of talent, but a 21-year-old running back, he's definitely when you just mentioned the guys behind him, Michelle, Jones, Lindsay, Henry, Cohen. I mean, there is a big drop off after him. He is the last one in that tier for me. So
yeah, I think for sure. I think I'm right with you.
All right, so the next one is another one from Andrew Harbaugh. It's from Twitter. So let's hear about let's hear about value tight ends in rookie drafts this year. And so that's interesting because I know you haven't done a lot on tight ends. However, you do have a theory, and it's in the book about where to be picking them in rookie drafts.
Yeah. So one thing I have done no study on tight ends. I've not watched any tight end tape yet for rookie drafts. I will get to that probably. I'll probably go running back, tight end, and then receiver is probably how I'll go about it. And I do some quarterback stuff. I think that we're at a huge disadvantage in terms of watching tape on quarterbacks for a lot of different reasons. It's not a place I spend a ton of time on because I think pedigree matters so much more than anything that I can add in terms of tape. So that's sort of my ordering of the process. I think that the data warrants attacking strong classes, right? So the 2017, the 2014 receiver class to some degree, the 2018 quarterback class, the 2017 tight end class, right? The 2017 and 18 running back classes, right? Those are great classes, historically great classes. You should follow suit, right? So now, does that mean take Noah Fant at 105? Probably not. No, I don't think that's right. No, and to give you an idea, I have charts, and you've seen them, and if you buy the book, you'll see what I'm talking about. But I have charts on. I break rookie drafts into ranges. And it's all start one, sort of normal format ADP, not super flex, not tight end premium. It's just generalized ADP. And there's been no tight end that has had a ADP of better than 6. And the way I look at ADP, it aggregates it over the entire year. So it's not just, did he go at ADP 6 in one draft? No. I look at it throughout the entire year, just to take out any fluctuations in terms of the time. So do I think that Noah Fant deserves that high of a pick? I'm not sure yet. From a tape and evaluation perspective, I haven't done it yet. But historically, I would say that would be a reach. And again, you have to weigh this player versus what this pick is worth in terms of future picks or other picks, right? This isn't just a, hey, he's the sixth best player in this draft, I should take him there, right? There's should be more to your decision making that goes into that. But I will say that targeting tight end later in your drafts, especially if there's going to be, I mean, I saw someone posting on Twitter, I don't know if it was McShay or somebody. I wish I got to pay better attention to who's posting these things so I can give them credit. But they said, hey, it could break the record for most picks in the top 100 for tight ends.
Yep.
Now, if that happens, that's really interesting because then I think you can get into the position in, round 3 of rookie drafts. And that's a really lucrative place to address the tight end position. So, and especially with the context of tight end position right now, I think a lot of it's in flux. And so, I mean, for a lot of different reasons, which I delve into in some detail in the book. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to, you should be open to being wide receiver heavy if it's a wide receiver heavy class.
So with the tight ends, like I think you're in your book, and I don't want to give away too much, but I think we talked about it on my show last year. So I think we're safe here. Drafting tight ends in the 3rd round, or 4th round, with pedigree day 1 or day 2 is a good bet. And when you look back this past year, like who fits that mold, it's Mark Andrews. I think you're pretty happy if you have Mark Andrews right now. And I think that this year is just going to be prime for that, because if you look at all these tight ends coming out, I haven't done enough on the tight ends either, but I can just say, in this case, I think you're just drafting profiles. So, day 2, 1 or 2 tight ends in the late 2nd, early 3rd, and even into the 4th and 5th. I mean, Chris got Mark Andrews at 502 last year. So
that's a great pick.
Right. And I got him at 408 and 406 or something. But I think that there's going to be a bunch of these players, Caden Smith from Stanford, Irv Smith Jr. from Alabama. I think that this is just one of those things, just like the Kalen Ballage pick last year. Draft one of these 2nd round or 3rd round tight ends in the 3rd round of your rookie drafts. It doesn't really matter if you like them. And I think that people get stuck on watching tape and falling in love with the players too much. Just draft one of them in the 3rd round of your rookie drafts, because you're probably not going to grab a receiver. You shouldn't be drafting receivers there. And you're probably not going to be finding running backs there. So take a shot on one of these guys. Doesn't even matter which one, to go off of the pedigree. So,
yeah, no, I'm with you. So I definitely think that's if it's going to be a tight end heavy class, which it looks like it is. Again, I'm taking other people's word for it at this point. I haven't gotten that far, but if it's going to be that, yeah, I'm open to mirroring what the NFL does.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, so Derrick Henry dynasty value. And what are you doing with them, right? Yep. This is a Chris Vanek special, so.
I spent, I don't know, it seems like months ragging on Derrick Henry's dynasty appeal. I just thought that I don't think he runs enough power. I don't think he, when his feet stop, the play stops, right? I mean, I just don't think he's versatile enough, like all of these, range of things. And then he sort of goes off. I think that, like, again, I was sort of hoping that didn't happen and he would be a buy, 50 picks later than he's currently going. Yeah. Sort of how I wanted it to go. Let's see, I'm just looking here. He's running back 19. He's at 45 overall. I was hoping he was going to fall closer to pick 100 and he would have been a screaming value. So he's going after Sony Michel, after Aaron Jones, after Phillip Lindsay. I think I like him. I certainly like him more than Aaron Jones and Phillip Lindsay. I think the Michel conversation's about right. I'd probably take Michel over him if forced. But yeah, I mean, I think he's fairly valued. In terms of his age, his production. I think he has, does he have running back 1 upside? Probably. Does he do it for a full year? That might be a different question. We'll see with the OC change, all of those things. But yeah, I mean, I think he's fairly priced. I was kind of hoping he would be a value coming into the season. But it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. But yeah, I think he's a fair value raise.
So what are you doing with him if you own him? Are you just going to hold him? Or are you going to try to deal him?
I own him. I think I own him in a couple spots. I tried to move. I tried to move away from him all season in one league, where I had, he's like my running back 5, and I was trying to do a whole range of trades with the Kerryon Johnson owner, and the guy just wouldn't budge. And
I was literally just going to say that. I was going to say, can you just add a 2019 first to him and trade him for Kerryon Johnson? Because that's what I want to do.
I think they're closer than that in value.
Yeah. Okay.
I do. Yeah, I do. I would suspect in the trade market, right? I think the 31 on Kerryon Johnson is, I think he trades cheaper than that. And I would bet that Henry Chain's a little bit more expensive than that.
I must just be higher on him, or
I'm certainly higher on him. I mean, I think Kerryon Johnson's got first round startup potential.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so and I would take him multiple running backs ahead of where he's ranked. I'll just say that.
I agree.
So yeah, I that would be I have tried that route. If it was me, I would be trying to package like a Derrick Henry and a guy that I'm trying to sell off, like a Tyler Lockett type of player for someone I feel really good about, Nick Chubb or Mixon. That would sort of be my approach with him. I wouldn't want to take a mid-19 first for Derrick Henry. I'd rather have Derrick Henry because
I agree.
I sort of am weighing those things. I think excuse me. I think a lot of the times trades, when people try and attach rookie pick valuation to players, that's fine. But I think that if you should look at it and sort of how they're going to trade in relation to other existing players too. And I think that he's a player that you probably return better value on trading a 2-for-1, or a 2-for-2 where you're getting an upgrade on one player. That would sort of be the trade that I'm going to try and do with a guy like Derrick Henry.
I agree. There's no way I'm holding him at this point. I am definitely trying to add something to him to move up in the running back tiers. Kerryon Johnson, I really like. I wonder, if you do like for Dalvin Cook or something like that. I'm looking on the trade finder and, Derrick Henry and Gesicki for Dalvin Cook. Like I would do that. I would want to trade.
That's interesting to me.
And I'm not a real big Cook fan. I honestly, this is going to sound funny. I trust Cook more than I trust Derrick Henry. So, and I know Cook isn't exactly trustable, but I was not on the Dalvin Cook fan train at all. But I think he has potential to be productive. And if I'm just comparing the two, I would rather have Dalvin Cook. So,
and I think the market agrees with you for sure. They're two players I'm not huge fans of either way.
Yeah, I mean, I own Cook in one league, and I thought he was fine down the stretch, but it was a disappointing season. I wasn't a big fan of him to begin with. All right, 2 left. Damian Williams. This one's more interesting than it seems. I think
this is a super interesting decision because I have him, and I haven't really gotten into the offseason trading a ton this year because I've been working on other projects, a book namely. But I was sort of going through and organizing all my rosters. When we get off, I'll probably finish it tonight. And I own a ton of Damian Williams. I think that he's going in the 70s in startup valuation. I think that's probably about fair considering who he's going around. What's interesting to me is again, you take high upside, right? I want bets that have high payoffs.
Yep.
Do I think that he could be a running back a top 12 running back in Kansas City? I'm not sure he has the talent for that. But I think that he could be their lead back. Do I think he's a top 12 producer in fantasy stats? Probably not. Do I think he could fit between 12 and 20? Yes. So 2 years, what is it? 2 years, $8 million. That's speaks to me that he's probably going to project to be a that they feel comfortable with him starting 2019. Is that a scenario in which they, if you got to be careful with that price though, because if they draft a guy like, Joshua Jacobs in round 2 or 3, Joshua Jacobs could be a freak show by week 3 and Damian Williams is out. So,
Yep.
I guess it kind of depends on what my roster construction is. Can I move up to trade, a Tyler Lockett type who I'm trading off high efficiency and Damian Williams for Kerryon Johnson, right? Probably not, but that's the type of trade that I'm trying to do with a Damian Williams. Would I take him over a late first? Probably. I would probably rather have Williams over than a late first. I think.
Would you flip him for a 2020 first?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I would too.
And one of the things that comes into that decision is that, the late 19 first, I sort of have an idea what that's going to be. When you kick it out a year, right, so we know it's going to be a good class, but when you kick it out a year and you're not sure it's going to be a great class, like you have the upside of having it be a really high pick, right? And so a lot of how I look at these decisions is right, you have just a random shot at being, you got an 8% shot of it being a running back, of being the 101, right? Whatever. I'm open to the idea that the higher picks, right? I think we underweight how much a random future first is worth, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah.
Because the top end of it, I think people usually think about it as, it's the 106, 107 type of valuation, but the 101 value, the chance that it's a 101 is a huge payoff, right? So that's a lot of how I think about those decisions. So I'd probably take a random 2020 first.
I agree.
More than a 2019,
especially in that class, because it's not, you can't even look at it as the player. You have to look at it as what it's worth, right? And so come 2020, that could be worth, that could eventually net you like a Saquon Barkley if you're packaging it up, for a player, someone rebuilding, whatever it might be. It could be Todd Gurley, whoever it might be. It's not necessarily, you can't look at it as, well, that might be Jerry Juby or something like that. It's the fact that it is a future draft pick in a great class that has value. Like and it fluctuates, but yeah.
I agree with you. And plus, like that pick, that if you take that pick, you insulate it, right? So it's not going to miss, right? Pick's not going to get hurt. That pick is not going to, get suspended, cut, whatever. That pick will be there, right? So if you need wide receiver help in season, right, you can do so many things with that pick, and it has a bigger market than a single player like Damian Williams, who have some, woeful event that occurs in the next, 6 months and completely devalue him to being worth nothing. So I sort of look at those two outcomes, and could I trade, if I need running back in season, could I trade a 2020 first back for Damian Williams? Probably, So, I could probably do that deal. So that's sort of something I think about.
All right, last one. What kind of hit does the value of Antonio Brown take if he goes to the 49ers like they're expecting? And how much does this raise Juju and James Washington?
I think Juju stays. I'll take it backwards. I think Juju's appropriately priced, like we talked about before.
I agree.
James Washington, I love the tape in college. I love the metric profile. I love his landing spot. I haven't seen. I actually didn't even look. I had ADP open a second ago. Here, let's see. I suspect that he is vaulting up in value, but probably would help if I look at actual receivers
94.
Here. He's 94 overall.
Yeah.
What is that wide receiver? I've got him at 96. He's 42 overall. Yeah. Again, I look at the players in his range. I like it quite a lot. Do I think he vaults in value 30 spots between now and the next time they run this? Probably. This talk on AB moving is going to vault his value up.
Yep.
That's one of the drawbacks of static and time ADP. Is this exact problem. So, we'll see how that market changes. But but yeah, I mean, I think I think do I think he can be a wide receiver 2 in this league? Yes. Am I going to pay more than him and Will Fuller sort of fit similar types of profiles, right?
Yep.
Primary deep threats, I'd have Fuller over him. There's a lot of these ancillary guys between James Washington and Fuller that I would probably have Washington over. Anthony Miller's, Pettis, Robbie Anderson, Traquan Smith, right? Give me James Washington. I don't know. I think Washington probably fits around the mid-30s.
No, I'm with you. It's funny because I was in trade
maybe
talks.
30 because there's a couple players in front of them that I would probably take over him.
Well, I was in trade talks before the AB news came out. It was when he was having problems, and then the news came out when that they were going to trade him. And I was talking to a guy, and he's like, "What do you want for James Washington?" And I said, "I don't, I'm not totally sure. 2022, maybe plus. Make me an offer, right?" And then the news comes out that they're likely going to trade Antonio Brown, and that he demanded a trade. I said, well, probably not going to be moving James Washington anymore, especially since his value is going to increase as soon as they trade, AB. So with AB, moving on, that's going to be, if I'm going to trade James Washington, that's when I'm going to do it. I wonder when that happens if you can get a 2021 for Washington.
I bet you can get that plus.
I'm quite sure in the spur of a moment you're going to. Yeah, I agree. It's probably going to be at least that. Yes. So.
Yeah, and I think that's plenty appropriate. Like I
agree.
I haven't studied the wide receiver class enough, but just looking at James Washington's profile, I think that he belongs in the. I think he was underdrafted by the NFL. I think he belongs in the late first conversation he belonged at the turn last year. It was a good class. I think he belongs probably somewhere in the, is he a top 5 wide receiver in this class? I'm not certain of that yet. I feel probably by the time all is said and done, yes, I would guess. Again, I haven't done all the work, and there's a lot left to know, but I suspect that that's where he would fall in this class. So that's worth a mid-first to me.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, I guess if you put him in this class, am I going to take the other rookies over him? I mean, no. I would rather he's gonna be in there in the top 5 for sure with these rookie wide receivers, especially when they get rid of Antonio Brown. So
right, yeah.
All right. So what about Antonio Brown's value?
So he fits a weird profile, right? Obviously, historic player, but the players that we see play into their mid-30s are high draft picks, right? Yep. And so Jordy Nelson's a good example of these guys who are real good players in their time, but then sort of weed out a little bit, right? And they sort of begin to dissipate as they hit 30, 31, 32. Is AB a historical outlier? Everything to this point in his career is pointed yes. But there have been players similar to him that have had this similar sort of thing where they hit this age and begin to erode more quickly than we expect. From a startup build perspective, I'm avoiding him at his cost. I don't like, what do we say? Safety early. And I like safety early. I do not want to be taking a risk on a 30-year-old receiver changing teams who, let's just assume it's San Francisco. I'm not convinced that's going to happen, but let's just assume it does.
Do you think it really matters though? Like the fact that he's going to be 31 when the season starts, the fact that he's going to be 31 and he's changing teams, it makes him an avoid for me anyway. I just, how many times have we seen these receivers? And I know it's a little different with him because he's technically still performing at a super high level. But how many times have we seen these receivers at the end of their careers change teams and they just turn into nothing? Like they were productive and then they just go to nothing. I'm not saying that that's going to happen with him, but I don't even think it makes any difference where he goes. At this point, like I don't know how I can't buy him.
Not at that startup cost. Is he interesting to me in like if I have a contending team? Is he interesting to me as a as a sort of a bridge type player? whereas I have a need at receiver, right? And I sort of go about it, hey, let's package, James Washington and, Derrick Henry those types of trades for a player like that, because I have a need at receiver. That would be something that would interest me more than taking him at the turn of a startup draft.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean,
do I think that deal gets done? Probably not, but that's more the type of acquisition I'd be trying to make from him.
I mean, you never know. The right owner, absolutely. I guess for me, in the off season, in this preseason, I just don't think I'm going to buy him, even if I'm a contender with a need. That seems like a guy that I want to see him perform a little bit in wherever he goes, San Francisco, New York Jets, wherever it might be. Maybe I pick him up mid-season for a playoff run, something like that. I don't know that I'm picking him up this offseason, especially at the cost, because what you said with James Washington and Derrick Henry, absolutely sign me up. I'll make that trade if I'm a contender. I just don't think that that's realistic at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly with you. I think that, but that's a market that I've sort of begun to pursue a little bit more, is that the aging sort of elite wide receiver, right? The Julio Jones profile I like to buy at 28, 29 years old, because I think it's more durable than people give it credit for. And that's really one of the things from the book, I think, is one of my takeaways is that. So for anyone still listening, for anyone that's made it this far into our conversation, there's a teaser. But yeah, I think that that profile is interesting to me, but again, it's the cost. So that's how I would look at it.
No, I'm with you.
So
that's it, buddy.
You got anything else you find interesting?
In the book?
No, just anything else that's interesting going on. I mean, so as a teaser, if you have pre-ordered the book, be on the lookout for your email address in the next 48 hours. If you haven't ordered the book yet, it's available for pre-order now. You'll get it. It'll be open and available on Monday morning for actual acquisition. Those would be two things that I would say. But yeah, what do you have sort of in do you have anything you're trying to do right now, Dynasty wise?
No, I mean, I'm in terms of like with my teams or anything like that. No, I've been spending too much time on little side projects and proofreading your book and reading, getting through that as best as possible. And then, our show. So,
it might be, there's a side project being worked on. Maybe that would be a topic in a future YouTube hangout. I don't know.
I'm sure that will. So
I'm sure that will occur.
But you can, I don't even think we said like Twitter handles or anything. I'm at AJ Willie 2. Part of the Top Dog Dynasty podcast, DAWG. My co-host Chris Vanix at FF Crusher, and Karen Shanik is at Quarter Hacks. And our show's good. We like to joke around. I make fun of Chris about being old all day. So
you had a good New Year's resolution.
Yeah, yeah. My New Year's resolution, and it's funny because I read about that in your book, and it's something that I have. There was many different narratives in your book that I have noticed or followed over the years, and I just didn't have any statistical data to back it up. So what my New Year's resolution is I wasn't going to basically go after the hot young quarterback this offseason. And I found myself doing it in the past, and I found myself doing it with Mariota. I've actually drafted him. And then Jameis Winston and Carson Wentz. And basically what the data shows is that there's a drop off at age 23, 24, 25.
Yeah, it's like, and there's a trough in there.
And it's funny because I actually said before I even read that part of the book, I actually said to myself this offseason, I'm not going to do that. And then as soon as I saw that in the chart, I said, oh my gosh, like I do this every single year and I get burnt by it. And sure enough, like I am not going to be doing that this offseason. So who do you think it is this offseason? Because I don't think Pat Mahomes fits in there, does he? He's still 22.
No, and I think it speaks to a little bit of is it some of that, if there's a struggle in that area? Yes. I also think to the point that you get guys like Kyle Lauletta and, you get those guys that are that age that are dynasty viable people, right, that are getting drafted as backups that draw the number on the year, on that data down, right? So you have some of that going on, right? So, what the average, quarterback is 30 or whatever at that, or whatever the specific metric is. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but it takes a beating right there. A lot of that is because you have, Kyle Lauletta's and, what's the kid, Mason Rudolph, like Josh Dobbs types of players, right? So that's one aspect of it. But if you take those guys out, that number would certainly rise, obviously. But I didn't want to. I'm not parsing the data for that. I'm parsing the data for just an age thing. And so, but I do think if you look at that's why guys like right, you get Baker, right? You sort of look at these guys, right? I think you take them, right? That's why you draft them in rookie drafts, right? That's why you do that, right? If you just think about the payoff of a just if you had done nothing else than just drafted a quarterback in round 3 of your rookie drafts over the past 5 years, what your team would look like. And even in start 1, right? That's fine, right? You would have some combination of Mahomes and Watson and Russell Wilson and Carson Wentz and Goff and maybe Baker, but probably not Baker. Baker's a little bit higher than that. But, one of these guys, Josh Allen, right? You have, look at that. That's a lot of talent. And in start 1, you're trying to capture upside. So if you just keep doing that, that's some of these guys don't hit, and you'll know, I think, probably after year 2, you'll know, but you'll have an idea at least. But yeah, I sort of look at that, and it's certainly a place. I always think of this conversation speaks a lot to Ryan Tannehill, right? Teddy Bridgewater, Mariota is a good example of this. Winston, I have higher hopes for Winston. I just think he just makes boneheaded decisions, or crab-like decisions. I don't know, one of the two. But yeah, you sort of look at that and it tracks with what we experience. And so you look at the data and you're like, all right, I see it. So that's certainly one of the things that I'm avoiding. I'm with you. I thought that was, when you said that on the book, I was like, yeah, he read the age chapter.
Well, and I guess you could point to the one who I don't think is going to do it is Goff. Like, he would be one that I would say, stay away from, because he's going to fit in that category. But I think his offense is going to keep him out of that. Like, I think he'll still be successful.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different, right? Those guys are, I don't think it necessarily speaks to guys that have produced a high or elite production before they hit that age, right? So
yeah, that's probably true.
Right. So if you're trying to project a guy like Mariota, right? If you're trying to project guys who are, like when Tannehill came out, right? When Bridgewater came out, where they were, they showed a little something, they're the new up and coming thing, right? The thing is to bet against that. Where guys like Goff and guys like Mahomes and guys like Watson, when they've done it, right? I think if you've seen it for one season, you can feel, you feel okay about it. When they've done it for 2, I think you feel a lot better. So Goff's an exception. I think Mahomes has played well enough that I don't think it's a fluke, and I didn't think he was a fluke coming out. So I feel really good about him. But yeah, I think that you have to be, when you try and project these guys to break out in their mid-20s, you're flying in the face of history, is what I would say. Yeah, but if they've already broken out, I think that's a little bit different of a conversation.
Yeah, I guess it's them. You're buying guys that you're looking to make the next step or to make the next jump, and then they don't do it. Yeah. And Goff isn't really in there. Mahomes really isn't in there. Right. Winston technically has not had like an elite year. So, and that was kind of the thing. You see like these little flashes for him, and you're just waiting for him to just throw 40 touchdowns and 4,500 yards, and Mariota the same thing. And that's probably what drives that number down. And I think basically the number is like the average, they end up being at age 23 quarterback 33, and age 24 it's 36, and 37 at age 24, 25, and then back down to 33. And then it starts coming back into reality. And and I guess it's more so you see those little flashes. They're not elite quarterbacks when they're young. And then people are buying them heavy and they're getting ranked high because of their potential. And then they never hit it. And that's what drives that number down.
That's exactly right. And so, I think definitely the approach is to go to avoid that. And so you take the guys early as upside date, as round 3 startup or round 3 rookie draft picks. And you sort of go with an established, I don't mind going early at quarterback. Like people will say, oh, you got to go late at quarterback. I don't think that if you go early at quarterback, it's this terrible strategy, right? Yeah. I think it matters on who you pick, right, and how you pick them and where you pick them. Yeah. I don't think it's a out and out strategy to reject. But what I would say is I don't want to get 2 guys like I don't want to stack Mariota and Winston together, right? Give me Phillip Rivers and I don't know, Dwayne Haskins or whoever's going to be the quarterback this year. Or you take a guy last year, you take, Andrew Luck was falling in round 10. Okay. All right. That's interesting to me. Mm-hmm. Or, you take, Breeze and then you backfill him with Josh Allen, right? Those things are interesting, right?
Yeah.
But because there's upside there both ways, right? With the aging guy and the younger guy. Whereas you take a guy like, getting overexposed on Rosen right now, right? Mm-hmm. If you're taking Rosen has to be a concern, Darnold has to be, and Allen to a certain degree, right? But if you're taking them in rounds 10 of startup drafts, that's a different conversation than round 3 or 4 of a rookie draft.
No, I agree.
So, yeah, I think that was an interesting, all of those age things got weighed down by rookies who didn't perform at that trough. But I think that speaks to the fact that you got to be careful about the breakout projection. So, well, Adam, this is always fun, and I always enjoy our time talking together. We text a bit, and then we get together on these things and vamp, and it's fun. It's always fun. I was I went up and I was like, hey, you texted me yesterday, and I was like, I texted you today. I was like, yeah, let's do it. We're like, all right, I'll get you in 10 minutes, and so it's certainly fun to get together. Again, the book will be out on Monday. If you've pre-ordered, check your email. And I will we'll talk to you guys soon. It's for Adam Wilson, AJ Willie 2 on Twitter. Jordan McNamara, you can find the book analyticsdynasty.com, on Twitter at McNamara Dynasty. And we'll talk to you guys soon.
See ya.